Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us all this evening. I am, delighted to formally announce to people for the first time that, YEM is beginning its campaign, Open Doors, Open Futures. So we will be having a 40-minute or so discussion tonight with our four panelists, who I will shortly introduce, um, on the topic of youth opportunity, Erasmus, the direction of travel, on negotiations with the EU, all of these things. And then we'll have about 20 minutes to ask questions. That's all. So first, we have Ellie Chowns, a British Green Party politician, serving as a Member of Parliament for North Herefordshire since 2024. She's previously served as member of the European Parliament for the West Midlands for Green Party between 2019 and 2020. Then we have Andrew Hadley MBE, who's the director of the Centre for International Leadership and Learning and Leadership, and specialises in intercultural and non-formal educational projects. He's formerly worked for the British Council and is currently a member of the steering committee for the UK National Campaign for Erasmus+, a president of the charity Society of London Ragamuffins, as well as a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. Then Maria Kurinna is a human rights advocate from Ukraine and a volunteer with Youth for Inclusive Europe, one of YEM's big partners. Maria has an intense experience at the grassroots level, developing the skills and capacity of local activists and organizations, and a background in advocacy at the UN and the Council of Europe. And of course, last but not least, we have Haydn Osborne-Brookes, YEM's head of campaigns and under-18s officer for the Green Party, and very accomplished sixth form student. Then there's me, Alfred Quantrill. I'm the president of YEM, current philosophy student. So I think to start off the discussion, it'd be great if we could hear from Ellie. So I'm wondering what's the air like right now currently regarding the youth experience scheme? Where do MPs feel it's going? Is anybody talking about it?
Hi, Alfred. Hi, everyone. It's really brilliant to be here, and just huge thank you to all of you for, keeping our star alive in various different respects. I bumped into somebody the other day who was wearing one of those lovely T-shirts with our star still on the back, and it's great to know that there's so many people out there still flying the flag for the UK being a European country. In terms of kind of how things are in Parliament, I mean, to be honest, Alfred, actually, none of us have been in Parliament for the last couple of weeks because we're on recess. We have this really weird timetable where we all go off for a summer break and then we come back for a fortnight and then we all beetle off again for our party conferences. And, I've got to be really honest with you. Europe is not a huge topic of conversation in Parliament. The kind of reset discussions in May were an opportunity for having a bit more focus on it, and that was a really positive thing. I think, casting my mind back to that period and to odds and sods of conversations that I have with people, with parliamentarians and with others, there is a real appetite, cross-party actually, for a youth experience scheme. There is a kind of real recognition of the kind of the huge unfairness, the huge missed opportunity, the huge kind of damage to intercultural relations. The really missed opportunity is so much what it's about. I mean, this is quite personal for me. I've got a son who's now in his early 20s who went to work. He's actually studying in Paris right now, but he went to work in France a couple of years ago to do a short-term job. And oh my goodness, the hoops that he had to jump through. When I think that just sort of 2-3 years previously, somebody of his age could have literally just hopped on a train and gone and got on with it. And it's so much wasted time and effort, isn't it? And I think so many people, and MPs are real people too. I mean, sometimes it might seem a little bit not, but, so MPs, like all people, have had this experience of kind of really recognizing the frustration of it all and the wasted opportunity, really. So I do feel that there is this opportunity to get a youth experience scheme, a kind of, an exchange mechanism, that particular type, a human European exchange mechanism into place. And I think that would be hugely beneficial. I suppose one thing that I am quite aware of is that there are real advantages to kind of talking about it, particularly as a youth-oriented thing. And I think that is absolutely right. One thing that gives me a little bit of concern is that, generally speaking, our politics in general are not very youth-oriented, unfortunately. We seem to make policy very much not with young people in mind, and we just see that in so many respects. So perhaps, an argument can be made that this is one way that the UK government could actually do something that's beneficial for young people, particularly with huge, what's the word they use, co-benefits. But I think, there's definitely, there's actually quite a few former MEPs in Parliament, and some of them are even Europhile, not Eurosceptic. So there is an opportunity, and there are things like the all-party parliamentary group on Europe. There are these mechanisms for pushing that forward. So while I have to kind of hand on heart confess that it's not been a kind of big campaign thing for me in the last couple of months, there are these opportunities that we can kind of come together around, and pincer movement of politicians from lots of different parties making the argument for the same no-brainer policies does help to move it forward, I think. Is that all right as a starter for 10?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I often remember, just your comments reminded me how I often think so many, as you say, MPs in Parliament campaigned for Remain, and then they've all sort of keeping it quiet now. I suppose lots of people on the right always say, oh, they're all crypto Remainers, and we might think, well, I go, yeah, I hope they are. So.
Well, do you know? This is what all of the polls show us. The majority of the British population are now Remainers. I remember a conversation I had with the gentleman on the doorstep. I knocked on his door a little while ago, and I was quite surprised. This was during the general election campaign. I was quite surprised. He said, what's your position on Europe? And that really doesn't often happen. And from his kind of vehemence, I thought, oh my goodness, he's going to be a passionate leaver that knows that I'm a really strong Remainer and wants to have a kind of bit of argy-bargy about it. But no, he was a man who had voted Leave and felt absolutely outraged that he'd been sold a pup, and he'd changed his mind completely, and was himself very passionate about actually policy that is for the good of the future of the country. So people do care about it. And I think actually the campaign for kind of a youth experience scheme, that sort of thing, is a way of talking really positively about the benefits of closer connection with Europe in a way that doesn't immediately put up the hackles of everybody who, from whatever perspective, but particularly from the Leaver perspective, who feels bruised from Brexit. It's a way of kind of, it's a really constructive thing to campaign for in relation to European cooperation.
Yeah, completely. As you say, a no-brainer policy. So here's to more chaps like that who you met on the doorstep. Andrew, so I was thinking, I know you're part of a big coalition of campaigners and groups who've been really pushing for Erasmus, more free movement, and this must seem like a pretty big step. So what do you see as, I suppose, the current priorities for this whole campaign, this whole movement that you're involved with?
Thanks, Alfred. Of course, Erasmus Plus is sort of a tangible manifestation of what Ellie's been talking about, the youth experience in general. But it's all very well to have a framework for youth experience in general, but then how do young people actually take advantage of that unless they happen to be wealthy, well-to-do, at a university, and so on. Erasmus Plus provides the framework and the funding for actually doing things, and I think that's the key thing about it, and that's the key way in which it links to the wider youth experience idea. I just would like to say I'm kind of representing the National Campaign Committee here, but there are at least two other members of our committee, colleagues with us tonight. So I don't want to introduce them. If I misspeak, please do correct me, Ray or Chris. But I thought I'd say a little bit about the campaign, what it aims to achieve, a little bit more about Erasmus Plus. focusing on the plus, and then a little bit just something about what young people really can look forward to with this, and because I think this is an important moment. I think it is a positive moment, um, and I agree with what Ellie's just said. In terms of the purpose of the campaign, it's really to support the government. It's a positive campaign. It's not about the awfulness of what we've lost or what we've been missing out on. Although I think we were in that position until May, and now there's an opportunity to see things differently. So the two words I would use are expectation and excitement. That expectations it's coming, excitement about the opportunities this will provide for young people, and encouragement. Probably the third E there, encouraging the government that they're actually on the right track. They're doing something that's going to be popular, that's going to have an impact, not only on young people themselves, but on the organisations that work with them, schools, universities, youth clubs, and many more. And that's great. It's the tide has somewhat turned, and we're swimming with the tide, but there's still some way to go, and we've got to watch out for the skeptics. We've got to make sure that the UK does join the full programme as soon as possible, and really motivate everybody we can find who is in a position to make, to take decisions or to influence decisions, that this is the right thing to be doing. The focus of the campaign is very much on the plus, because what a lot of people really don't understand is that Erasmus Plus is not just about universities and privileged white middle class well-to-do students. Absolutely not. The focus of Erasmus Plus is on young people with fewer opportunities. That's the phrase which is used in the programme guidelines, and that's what it actually sets out to do. And about 60%, more than 2/3 of projects are non-university projects. They're about further education, vocational training, schools, e-twinning between schools, even primary schools, classroom links. Incredible opportunities that are provided. Adult education, and then again, not just about mobility, as it's called. It's not just about moving people from one place to another. It's not just about opportunities for young people to travel. It's about schools developing partnerships at which they're going to, change the curriculum, learn from each other, learn from experience elsewhere. Training of youth workers, who are a group, who are largely ignored, and have been depleted in recent years. It's about universities doing joint research and coming up with really interesting things, all funded by Erasmus Plus. And I thought I would just give just 5 very quick examples of what it funds, that we're including in our campaign report, which will be the main document behind the campaign, shortly to be published. But we found, by trawling through all the data of previous projects, some extremely surprising examples of what organisations in the UK have benefited from, and not just the range of organisations, but the range of topics. So, for example, the Scottish Football Association applied for a grant and got funding to improve their coaching in their community clubs. Cardiff City Council got a grant to engage young people in managing a protected nature reserve in the Bristol Channel. A primary school in Northern Ireland had a grant to work with a partner in several other countries to look at how to encourage young people to cycle to school and how to increase safety standards and safe practices for doing so. The University of the Arts in London got a grant to improve their methods of teaching ceramics. And a company in Wales had a grant to create a training course to train teachers how to teach about AI in schools. Now, there's just a tiny range of the huge variety that goes on. Most of those not to do with mobility. but for young people, it is about mobility, and there's so many different things that that can be looked forward to. So for you guys, and I also want to say how important it is having YEM as a partner in this campaign. You represent a huge group of young people, and we need those voices to be heard. And I think if anybody is going to influence the outcome of this, it's going to be young people. It's not going to be people like me spouting on like this. But what can you look forward to?
Well,
Obviously,
yeah, I think it's your point about the plus in Erasmus is so salient. I know so many friends, partners I've spoken to in Europe. For them, for them, Erasmus is almost kind of helpful fund for doing useful domestic youth engagement. It's really they really don't see it as a kind of
I mean, you get your
excuse for
university,
traveling. You're completely right.
You get your university exchanges, of course, youth exchanges, all sorts of projects through youth organisations, including training, youth dialogue, policy dialogue with policymakers. You've got something called youth participation activities, which enables young people anywhere to develop their own community project and get funding for it. And it doesn't have to even be an international project.
Yeah, exactly. It's really, really
you've
valuable.
got this incredible thing called Discover EU, which allows 18-year-olds and in some cases up to 21-year-olds to travel for a month around Europe and experience the culture of different countries on an interrail pass. So, extraordinary things that you've got to look forward to. And who doesn't want that? If anybody says we shouldn't join this program, which incidentally is the best opportunity program in the world, it's not just Europe, it covers much more than Europe. We need to ask them, why not? Why don't you want our young people to have these great things? So
yeah,
that's how that's where I am on this. But please do come back with a few questions. I'll have a few more points later on, perhaps. Thank you very much.
oh, yeah, thank you, Andrew. So the question for you, Maria, and thank you for your point in the chat. I'll send you a text. So you're representing Youth for Inclusive Europe, and so I wanted to ask, what do you think some mistakes campaigning organisations can make in reaching young people from maybe disadvantaged backgrounds or marginalized groups who are not so directly involved in politics?
Yes, thank you very much, dear friends. I'm really happy to join you from Youth for Inclusive Europe. My name is Maria Kurinna. I'll just quickly introduce myself and say why it is important for me to join the campaign, because also my lived experience was related to mobility in education. I'm from Ukraine. I'm Ukrainian. I've been living there for almost all my life before the full-scale invasion. But when we, for example, didn't have even the visa-free regime with Europe, it was impossible for Ukrainians to apply for those opportunities. So, and still, with the other opportunities, I was privileged to go to study and then have some professional experience in the UK, in Sweden, in Japan. I'm from regular family, not from some privileged family in Ukraine. And only my mom have degree, my dad doesn't. So I wouldn't be where I am without it. And I also worked a lot with engaging young people, both in Ukraine, especially though I'm coming from Luhansk, it's Donbass, Eastern Ukraine. I worked there before the war in 2014 with young people. And I worked with young people who were coming from the occupation and from the liberated cities. I worked on the ground in this contact line in Eastern Ukraine before the full-scale invasion. And I always saw so much perspective from the children, young people, but I realized they don't know a lot. They don't know even where to look or whom to ask. They don't have some mentors to ask or role models. And they sometimes they want to, I don't know, to go even travel around Ukraine, but they don't know from where to start. And the same with, I was doing my master's here in the University of Essex in human rights, and I saw many young British English people who were very sad and like even not depressed, but they didn't understand how they can change some policies related to them in the UK. In Ukraine, it's very like, you can do everything. We can advocate, we can go and campaign, we can talk to parliamentarians, but here the democracy is more stable. There are more political traditions. And they were like, I don't see my future. I don't understand what to do. I don't know. It's politics. It's so far from me. So I think even to try, to talk with these people as peers is important. To tell your stories is important, and just like do very good awareness raising campaign that those possibilities are there. And also it's exactly very important to say it's not only about the students who are doing the university degree, it's about also vocational schools or non-university experience. So why I really is campaigning for Erasmus Mundus Plus is because it's about equality, it's about social equality and financial equality, because those who are less privileged or not privileged with different background, not from the wealthy, are the same bright people, and they have to have such opportunities, and they have to feel that it's the politics that are going on in the UK are for them and about them, and they are allowed, they can bring their voice to the politics. Plus, it's about when you, even if you go and exchange, you study in other university, it's not only about like great experience in your academical life, it's also about expanding your horizons, how you see things, how you can learn the best practices, how you learn maybe also the other language and culture, how you build these networks, because those students who are your peers now, they will be professionals in the EU, for example, or they would like to come to the UK one day. And it's your network, it's invaluable. You can later like do some collaborations together. And it's also about reciprocity. It will allow European students to go to the UK. Now we see that it's much less students from the EU coming to the UK, and it's also about this possibilities for universities and other institutions to collaborate. But speaking about young people, I think it's just a matter of talking. Like this peer-to-peer approach is good when they understand you're not coming from some posh family and you're like telling them how to live their life and how many opportunities they have. No, it's about like telling them your real story. Like, I'm from working class city, Luhansk. It was very depressed even before war, but I'm doing all right, I think now. And maybe little Maria would never believe that she would see all the things, but also would try to bring voices of others to enjoy this and to build a future, because the future is about and in the hands of those who are now young people. So those who will be retiring, I am sure they would like to have stability and progressive country, and the country with innovations and with open mind people ruling this country. Well, I'm open to any later questions. Thank you very much.
Yes, yeah, I really, that idea of I guess almost leading by example maybe, and taking the opportunities and showing people with the little amount we do have what you can achieve, and then as things look like they're going to be opening up so many, hopefully, that peer-to-peer, as 1,000 people take that chance, they'll tell 10,000 people and then 100,000 people.
Exactly.
And yeah, and on kind of democratic engagement, it's so a colleague of mine in the pro-EU youth space, Maurizio Kutin, often talks about how important it is for the security of democracy for young people to feel like they have opportunity, because there's that lack of opportunity that is really driving disenchantment with democracy. So on reaching young people, Haydn, I was wondering if you could speak about, well, the government probably isn't too popular with young people right now. What do you think they might be getting wrong, or what do you think they could mistakes they could steer into in negotiating the youth experience scheme? And what do you think YEM can do to kind of target the government to make sure that they deliver on youth priorities? What are we saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll link this a bit to our campaign asks and what we're asking the government to do. Recently, the government has said that they want only 2 years stays for those on the youth experience scheme. Now, that is an extremely short amount of time, and we think it will be far less likely that there are going to be opportunities offered to young UK citizens and EU citizens come to the UK alike if they can only stay for 2 years. And so we're calling for a 4-year stay to maximise the potential opportunities for both citizens from the UK and from the EU. We're also calling for full mobility within the EU, rather than just allowing young people to go to one country in the EU, because there are many structures and organisations which work across the EU. We are calling for young people to be able to move throughout the EU on the youth experience scheme. We're calling for an uncapped reciprocal number of places. So the government has been concerned about how a youth experience scheme could look for them in terms of migration. Whilst it isn't our end goal, we think that having a reciprocal scheme which isn't capped like the current government wants it to be has potential for allowing more young people to go on the youth experience scheme. Another thing is that costs of the youth experience scheme is another big part of it, and so we want lowered visa costs to ensure equity of access. So about the highest cost for young people going on experience schemes and things like that is the immigration health surcharge costs. And basically, if we're doing a one-in, one-out policy, even if it's uncapped, there should be an equal people in the cost to both the UK and the EU in terms of saying to have a lower immigration surcharge cost and allowing for it to be more accessible to young people. And how are we pushing for that? We're pushing for people to email their MPs. We're trying to lobby the government into adapting the youth experience scheme a bit to economies and make it so more young people can access this youth experience scheme.
Thank you, Haydn. Yeah, on that point of moving within the EU, I think is so important. Especially, I have heard talk that some people in government want to make it on a kind of have talked about sort of limiting things, having it on a reciprocal basis between nation states. I think it's so important for people to tap into those whole European-wide networks. And I think we also, especially on the education front, I remember someone making a point to me, a point that really stuck with me about how the UK is perceived and how we have such good educational institutions and how we don't want to miss out on the chance of so many bright young people from Europe coming to our kind of centers of innovation, centers of learning, and not bringing their dynamism. So to go back to Ellie, I think sometimes Parliament from the outside can seem quite impenetrable. So I was wondering if you could shed some light on how we can, as young campaigners or as any kind of campaigner, persuade parliamentarians to support initiatives for youth mobility, initiatives on Europe. Can you give us any insight into how lobbying politicians from the outside can be done best?
Sure, Alfred, I'll try. I mean, I have to confess, sometimes it can seem pretty impenetrable from the inside as well, on account of us having a political system that is, quite extraordinarily, in my view, in desperate need of modernisation in every respect. But kind of setting that aside, I mean, I suppose the cynical brief answer to how you can get politicians to kind of pay attention to the thing that you want them to do something about is by showing them that it is in their interests, that overwhelming numbers of voters are kind of not going to vote for them if they don't support the thing. But it's actually really hard to kind of mobilize a huge campaign like that. Not every MP is amenable to logical argument, but quite a lot are. And I'm not one of those people who kind of subscribes to the idea that all politicians are the same and they're all in it for themselves, etc., etc. In my experience, like, it's a pretty difficult job. And I would go so far as to say that probably most people have quite a strong public service ethic, and don't always, MPs are unbelievably short of time. And so one way that you can kind of get your message across effectively is by just being really clear in your asks. So Haydn just outlined a nice little list of specifics of kind of, this would be the really not very good version of a youth experience scheme, and this would be the much better version of it on this dimension. So you want a short number of those, 3 or 4 of those kind of things, and those specific asks, and then you want to get your MP on side. And some of you might be really lucky to have an MP that, answers their inbox like this and engages with the detail and will kind of give you a really good response saying already, yes, I'm absolutely on side. And then you need specific things for them to do. So you need, an EDM for them to sign, and you need them to write to the minister. And if you're lucky, you might get an MP who's prepared to kind of pose an oral question or a written question, something that will kind of use a parliamentary mechanism to raise the issue up the agenda. I do a lot of, I hold surgeries, I hold constituency surgeries, and most people who come to see me come about, specific issues to do with benefits or whatever it is that's affecting them personally. But quite a few people do come about policy issues, and I would encourage you to, as campaigners, to go and to make an appointment to go and see your MP in a surgery. We have 20-minute appointments. It's plenty of time to have, an in-depth conversation where you explain why it is that version is a bad youth experience scheme and this version is a good youth experience scheme, and to put the MP on the spot and get them to commit to doing X, Y, Z actions in Parliament on your behalf. So, the most that, the more that can be done, the better, particularly if you have a Labour MP, to be honest, because one of the features of our political system is it is extraordinary, power is extraordinarily centralised in the executive. Labour MPs therefore have, more opportunity to influence government policy, arguably. On the other hand, so many of them are, perhaps reluctant to put heads above parapets. And so if you've got an opposition MP, like a Green or whatever other version, a Lib Dem, say, or whatever, you might have better luck in getting them to commit to actually banging on about it openly in the House. And then there's, MPs do also have the opportunity to in theory, to nobble a minister in the corridor while we're doing one of those outrageously long-winded voting processes to also put the pressure on too. So there aren't any kind of magic bullet ways of exerting influence, and sometimes it can, I used to run a campaign where I got people to send standardized letters to MPs, and then I used to work in the civil service where I helped ministers write responses to those standardized letters, and sometimes it can feel a little bit like a machine from both sides. But for myself, I know that both the standardized ones and especially the personally written ones with kind of personal examples of things, I absolutely do keep track of the quantities of correspondence and the passion, with which people express themselves. So it is always better to lobby your MP than not, because otherwise they, they're not mind readers. They don't know what you're thinking. So do that campaigning and that chipping away, and especially the face-to-face.
Well, no, I have to admit, I got a Word document up there to take some notes as you were speaking. Those were, really, really useful insights. Sorry. No, thank you so much. That targeting your MP with the kind of the clear points, and then the story is,
just to be specific, because if you target them just saying, please commit to supporting a youth experience scheme, it's very easy for them to say, Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I'll do my best, and that might not actually lead to anything. So, at the very least, get them to forward your letter to the minister and make sure that those specific asks are in the letter, because then the minister or the civil servant who writes the letter for the minister has to answer those specific questions. And if they don't answer them, write back saying, oh, by the way, you accidentally forgot to answer my specific points. Perhaps you'd like to try again.
Yeah, no, completely that. Yeah, so we'll try and target some ministers maybe. Let's see what we can do. Now, so Andrew, I was wondering again, going back to this idea of your kind of coalition of campaign groups. We are, hopefully going to get Erasmus, and hopefully this youth experience scheme will be something fruitful. What do you feel like next steps might be? Is that too far to go? Or do you feel there's a kind of specific momentum for these things, but perhaps after that it might dissipate? Where do you see the pro youth mobility, general free movement going?
I think there's two types of next steps. I think there's next steps for the campaign, which is slightly structured and slightly dependent on how fast we can organise certain aspects. So the European movement are trying to organise an event either at the House of Commons or nearby sometime in November, probably towards the end of the month, which will be the kind of focal event for the campaign. And from that will grow a number of possible actions that individuals and groups can take. And in the meantime, we've been contacting huge numbers of different organisations, people like the National Youth Agency and UK Youth and Best for Britain and all of those that are likely to support, and they are very supportive of the campaign. But so far, we haven't been able to give them things to do. So they will have things that they can get on with and do, and as will individuals. And writing to MPs will be or meeting MPs will be an obvious thing. But we haven't initiated that yet because we want to have all the pieces in place before we do that. So a good report that can be handed out and so on and so forth. I think also though for individuals, it's about getting well informed. We've got to be well informed about this, and that's why I constantly emphasize about the reality of Erasmus Plus, knowing the surprising things, telling people what they don't know about it. Because as long as they think it's just a university program, we won't really persuade the doubters. Once they realize all the richness that goes with that word plus, then they may sit up and be surprised. As you said just now, I think Ellie said, what's in MPs are interested in what's in their interest. One of the things we've been doing by analysing the data is to find out how much Erasmus Plus funding, if you want to look only in terms of money, or how much Erasmus Plus activity was going on in each constituency. And we will be able to, quite soon, be able to actually pin down an actual figure for how much each constituency benefited financially, which is not the main benefit in my opinion, but for some people it's important, how much they benefited financially between 2014 and 2020 under the Erasmus Plus programme. So that, for example, is going to be some very useful information because constituencies, I'm sure Ellie would agree that constituencies is sort of the closest thing to MPs' hearts, rightly so. And then beyond the scope, the relatively short scope of the campaign, because we do believe that a successful negotiation will come fairly soon. Beyond that, the campaign then has to turn itself into a promotional campaign to make sure that people are well aware of all this, and that organisations apply for the grants, that young people get involved, that we have lots of youth projects and policy dialogue with young people, and that's where an organisation like YEM absolutely comes into the frame. Because the worst thing that could happen would be for the scheme to be launched and to be a damp squib, and that must not happen. We've got to make sure that schools across the country, organisations of all kind, and young people in particular, get involved.
Yeah, I completely agree. The scheme has to come together well, or the far right will be proven correct. And well, that's the whole point of our campaign, to make sure that these key asks come through, that the government doesn't negotiate this half and half scheme that, you know, doesn't actually please anybody. So we've had 40 minutes, so I am going to move to questions. However, I'm actually going to be really cheeky, and I'm going to start with a quick question from from myself to Maria, because I just wanted to pick up on something that you said, not actually particularly necessarily relating directly to the structure of the main conversation. You were speaking about the kind of nature of politics in Ukraine versus the UK, and you said something really interesting about how, and correct me if I'm wrong, but something like that Ukraine, because it's maybe a younger democracy or has a less kind of concrete traditional institutions, has this kind of what you described as an almost kind of political vibrancy to it, that people really feel like they can make a change. How do you think we in the UK, being in our kind of stuffy 1,000-year-old democracy, can learn any lessons from what's going on in Ukraine? Can we? Is there any hope for us?
Oh, I'm very humbled because in Ukraine, vice versa, especially before full-scale invasion, we always watched to the West and especially to the UK, US, like to our European but bigger brothers. So how we can learn from you through democracy, traditions, human rights, etc. But now, well, you know what is the situation everywhere. But no, I mean, we are not legally, we are a very ancient country, but legally we are quite young and very vibrant democracy. But also, I think we have a bit different mentality in terms of, especially after the Orange Revolution and after Revolution of Dignity in 2013, you know that all protests actually started in Ukraine from students. Students saw that our ex-president, pro-Russian President Yanukovych, didn't sign EU association, EU visa-free regime association agreement. And it meant that we, when we were traveling, we need visa to Czech Republic, to Poland, to any country. And it's a lot of bureaucracy. We had to provide financial statements. And for students, it was impossible. Forget about even studying there. Only very rich families could afford that. So, yeah, students were very active, but also they were very active in engaging. There was like, so you have a lot of capacity. I saw, like, even in when I saw very active students during my education, there is always, you know, this core of people who can start this push. It's no, I'm not saying that all Ukrainians are super active, but I'm saying that, I don't know, it's just important maybe to start this conversation from you can actually try to act. Yes, we're a lot of people are saying, oh, we don't decide anything, but have you ever tried? And give some examples that you already achieved as a group, as an organization, etc. And look at Palestinian students and their supporters. They are so active as well. Like they have this, they have the skills. Well, they are fighting for a very long time, but how they engage in very well, very actively others. So yeah, that's it. And in Ukraine, like even now, during the war, during the martial law, you know, probably if you heard, I'm not sure, we had again protests of mainly young people when there was in the parliament, I don't know, there was this very ridiculous bad actions when they wanted to basically destroy all this anti-corruption infrastructure that we were building for the last 10 years. And some of institutions that we have even like past the European countries don't have. So that was young people who are even like younger than me. They're like 17, 18. And we were thinking like my generation is very active because we grew up when we had nothing and we had fight for everything. So every time when parliament wanted to take democracies down, we went to the streets, we went to Maidan. And we were thinking like, but this generation, they're younger, they already had a lot in terms of like, they had normal life, they had some finances, education, they're probably, and they looked like more laid back, and they didn't look like those who will be politically engaged. But then some students who were active in Kiev, they were so professional. I talked to them, I was in Kiev, and they were not only professional in terms of how to engage, they were also trying to do mediation. They were looking around to prevent any, provocations, to prevent violence. They were communicating, they were participating with, like, talking to police. And it's just incredible. I'm like, how do you know these things? They're like 22. So we managed to not destabilize the country, but also those laws were not adopted. And we had to be very, I don't know, very cautious, but it's in every country. You also have to be cautious, like to have stability, not to have, I don't know, violence during protests. It's very important. But yeah, I just think we have to be believers, but we also have to know the tools, how to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, let's hope the UK youth can learn some lessons, and we'll all, well, maybe we probably won't be taken to the streets, but certainly maybe we should be. So I'm just going through the questions now. I believe the first question was from Joshua Hall to Ellie. What do you think is the best way to get other young people like myself to be involved in campaigning for this, I presume, Erasmus Plus, the yes? And how do we showcase the real benefits of Erasmus to other young people?
Sorry. The best way to get young people involved in campaigning, I'm probably not the best person to answer that. I'm 50. I'd ask young people. I think Haydn should answer that, or somebody else should answer that. I mean, as a general rule, campaigning is a kind of snowball thing. Like you have to create opportunities for people to plug in where they feel that they are doing something useful. If you get them plugged into campaigning and they just feel demoralized by it, then it ends up having a negative effect. But, certainly with kind of general election campaigning, which is the stuff that I know about, election campaigning, just kind of the purposefulness of getting your teeth into something and feeling that you're finally getting somewhere. And actually politics in general. And I want to, shout out to anybody, not just issue-based campaigning. I did issue-based campaigning for 25 years of my life, and then I got involved in politics when I hit 40. And it's been really, really positive, because there's this kind of sense of you are a drop in the ocean, but all of these drops add up into waves eventually, and you can genuinely make change happen, and change not just politicians and policy, but also change the kind of general social attitudes as well. So I think finding whatever it is for individuals that gives them that sense of achievement and engagement, and partly creating a bit of a sense of family in any campaign, and a kind of sense of there's a real collective to the action here. It's not just an individual thing. I'm just trying to find the bit of where the question was.
I will jump in quickly, Ellie, and say that if you are a young person here, or if you know any young people who want to get involved, then they can join YEM. If you go to yem.org.uk, join today, or encourage young people to join. It's for under 35s. You can sign European Movement's Erasmus Plus petition, or email your MP using our template, which is also on yem.org.uk.
Well, yeah, thank you, Haydn.
And I've seen the second part of the question is, how do we showcase the real benefits of Erasmus to other young people? I have one word: video.
Video it is. So another question to you, Ellie. How does the youth of the UK push the UK government to establish vehicles of youth participation in policy, like a youth minister or a mandatory seat for youth representative and industry on a relevant committee?
Yes, absolutely. So we've got an interesting opportunity, right? Because the forthcoming elections bill is going to include votes for 16-year-olds. So there's suddenly this, much bigger constituency of young people. And I'm really hoping that that is going to concentrate government's minds about, the importance of youth voice in politics. I've, been lobbied by young people themselves to lobby on this, to make the point that it's not just about giving younger people the vote. It's also about the kind of, the support and the, if you like, the citizenship education and the kind of mobilization and the kind of, the civics, I think is what they call it in America, the kind of ensuring that people really understand what it means, because there's far too many people of all ages who feel disenfranchised and demoralized and disengaged from politics, and just extending the franchise in itself isn't the solution to that. Pushing on specifics like a youth minister, yes, that could be a good idea, or at least kind of getting the Women and Equalities Minister to really focus on youth issues as well. And just in terms of mechanisms to do that, in this, I sort of answered a previous question about campaigning mechanisms, and that's, it's the same advice really. On the thing about kind of mandatory youth representation, I think that's a really interesting point. When I was a councillor and I became a cabinet member in a local council, and there were all sorts of kind of little, local boards that the council had responsibility for convening. And very early on, right immediately, we were trying to convene a board for, to guide this programme that I think it was the Towns Fund. Government has said, Herefordshire can apply for all of this many millions of pounds. And basically all the people that had applied for it were older white men. And we said, we're just not going to have that. We're going to have kind of rules about half of the members of the board have got to be women. There's got to be a couple of youth reps, because not just one youth rep, but kind of two. So they've got support, or somebody kind of giving them support. And yes, it took effort, and we didn't always succeed in ensuring that there was that representation. But I am a fan of these kind of mechanisms of setting kind of benchmarks for, ensuring there is representation. Now, just because you've got one token young person doesn't mean that young people's interests are going to be represented necessarily in the decision making. So we've also got to be, really aware of that. So I'd be a bit wary of kind of focusing campaigning just on saying, oh, there must be a young person on this, that, and the other body. We've got to make sure that all policy is done, goes through a youth lens, basically. Back to the point that I was making right in the introduction about, in any respect, whether we're talking about, how we invest in health, or how we invest in even in education, we are not, as a country, in my view, sufficiently focused on what politics needs to do for young people. And actually, that relates to the problem that politics is just far too short term in general. We should be having a kind of generational lens in politics. What is it that, the kids of today are going to need in 30 years' time from their country? And then how do we create that? So I haven't got any magic bullets, I'm afraid, but I hope that's addressed the question.
I think generally when someone claims they have a magic bullet, we should all be concerned. So thank you for that. Yeah, brilliant analysis. To give you a break for a moment, Ellie, we've had a question for Andrew. Could you tell us, Andrew, about the Europeers network and ongoing opportunities for development after participation in programs like Erasmus+?
Yeah, thanks. I was hoping to mention that, and thanks, Madalena, for jogging me. Just very quickly on the thing about a youth minister, isn't it incredible that we're one of the only countries that doesn't have a youth minister or a youth and sports minister? Most countries even have a whole ministry for youth, and it's extraordinary that we ignore our young people to that extent. Just as an anecdote, I once went and visited the Minister of Youth and Sport in Serbia, and what his department was doing was really quite extraordinary, and there was so much we could learn from that. Part of our problem in this country is that we think no foreigners have got any good ideas, and everything is only the Brits that have got any decent ideas. Sorry. Europeers, well, it's a network. It exists in many countries. I brought it to the UK a few years ago. It's a network of young people who have had experience in Erasmus Plus projects, specifically outside of university, but it can include people from university as well. And the aim of it is to empower those young people, give them further skills by engaging them as the ambassadors for the programme, getting them to go and talk to schools, talk to youth groups and so on and so forth, to motivate other young people. Because there's nothing better, as Ellie said, it's got to be the young people themselves who do this. And they could tell their stories of the amazing experiences that they'd had and the benefits that they'd got from doing a project, whether it be a whole year abroad or just a couple of weeks. And that motivates young people a million times more than anything anybody of my age could possibly say. Now, we ran that network successfully in the UK. It became one of the best examples in the whole of Europe, until, of course, we were chucked out, or we dragged out of Erasmus Plus, and that folded, or the funding for that folded at the same time. I am fully intending to bring it back as soon as possible. And anybody who's interested, the sort of starting point is to join our intercom platform, which I shall put a link into the chat. Young people join for free. It's not very sophisticated because it's been set up with, on a shoestring, but it will develop, and it will be a sort of source of information and networking as we go forward.
After the meeting, where I'll put out the Europos link to everybody in YEM, sort of with a tie-up message for this. So we've got 3 minutes left. Very quickly, I want to give 2 short questions to you again, Ellie. So we've got one from Chris Hammond, East Kent for EU. How can you directly help the campaign for Erasmus Plus? Are you able to talk to MPs? And one from Hugo Brady. I guess these are both quite practical questions, so I'm pairing them. Are you or any other MPs planning to write a letter to a minister, which I can ask my MP to sign? He is Labour and is nice.
Thanks. Right. So I worry I'm going to disappoint some people. I can't do all the advocacy for this myself. And I have to be really honest, as one of 4 Green MPs, each of us shadowing at least 6 portfolios. I cover all of foreign affairs, and that's only half of one of my 6 portfolios. I just, the honest answer is no. I can't promise to kind of nobble other MPs specifically on this issue, because there are, however many other dozens of issues that I might need to nobble particular MPs on. And kind of a bit similar about the letters, like with the letters, it's sometimes MPs do organise a jointly signed letter, but it's generally in response to this thing has happened in the world. We need a letter in the next 24 hours and we're going to get 500 MPs signed onto it. And there's loads of stuff that happens on the WhatsApps to get that done. I would, what I'm suggesting more is it needs to come from constituents to their MPs. Now, the organisation like YEM might organise the format of the letter that says this, that, and the other is the key issues. And then it's the constituents that need to ask the MPs to write to the minister with that. The minister might end up getting 200 letters saying basically the same thing with a different covering letter from a different young person, but there's no harm in that. And that will kind of show them that it's coming from a range of places rather than just, it's just that little bit of extra effort requested on the part of the constituent and the MP themselves. Other than just signing on to a round robin from one MP.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much for that insight on the letters. Haydn, very quickly, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I will say that Ellie has been an absolute star on this. So Ellie is my MP. I live in North Herefordshire, and I actually sent her our email template, and the next day I saw that she had spoken about it in the House of Commons at PMQs. Now I don't know if that was under my direct influence, but she's definitely been campaigning actively on this issue, and I'm really, really proud to have her as my MP because of that. So thank you, Ellie.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, and that brings us to 7:30. So a particular thank you to Ellie for taking the time to come and speak to us, giving us all your insight. Thank you so much to Andrew for talking about Europeers, giving your expertise. Thank you so much, Maria, sharing especially your wonderful insight on Ukraine, as well as your general story and your background. And of course, Haydn, our lovely campaigns officer, for telling everyone what we've been up to. So yeah, that's a goodbye from me, and thank you all very much for coming, and please do support our campaign. We hope to be in touch soon with more exciting details. So all the best, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.